can you situate it in the Constitution?
Or political parties tribunal is one of the acts which is used for dispute resolution.
You said one of the acts.
Yeah,
I'm talking about
the main act actually.
I'm talking about the political parties tribunal.
Oh, you're talking about political parties tribunal. To place it in the Constitution.
Does it have a constitutional basis?
Well, it does.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for.
It's indicated that in the Constitution that disputes political parties tribunal is established by the Constitution.
Yes, that was what I'm looking for, sir.
I can't place it exactly.
You can't place it in
exactly
the Constitution.
Yeah.
Now, IEBC as a commission has a mandate in dispute resolution.
Yes.
Do you place that mandate in the Constitution?
Yes.
Yes.
That is one of the...
I'm just asking if and I know you know these things, maybe you can just relax, and we don't have a lot of time.
Yes.
And I want to draw as much as possible from you so that the panel can get a way of evaluating you, because you have applied for this job. Can you place that mandate in the Constitution?
Yes. Because that is one of the...
Where in the Constitution?
I think section 83.
Section 83.
Yeah.
May I just remind you, sir, that the Constitution is divided into articles, not sections. So you say it is Article 83. Are you sure about that, sir?
Well, I think so.
Okay. It's Article 884 of the Constitution. Now, in practice, and I'm not sure whether you've encountered this, but do you think in the execution of the mandate of the political parties tribunal and the execution of the mandate of IEBC as a dispute resolution forum for electoral disputes, do you think there is a conflict between those two?
No, there's no conflict. Because the disputes which IEBC gets to hear normally are before they come to the political parties tribunal. So, but if there is a dispute which is heard at the political parties tribunal, there is actually no conflict, because the aim of all is of both dispute tribunal at political parties tribunal and at the IEBC is to resolve electoral dispute.
So are you saying that the political parties tribunal has appellate jurisdiction in relation to disputes handled by IEBC?
Yes, it does.
Are you sure about that?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of any decisions of the High Court? You have said your mainstay is the High Court. Are you aware of any decisions of the High Court on the jurisdiction exercised by IEBC and the political tribunal?
No, I'm not aware.
You're not aware. Now, in your biodata that you filled while making this application, at paragraph 16, you indicated that you are, and you've said that now, you are elected the MP of a newly created constituency, and you said it's the Gwasi.
Correct.
Yeah, that was, you are the first MP.
Yes.
It was that was it was created which year?
1997?
And that is the year that we had elections.
Yes.
Now, what was the legal regime applicable to boundaries delimitation in 1997? Boundaries delimitation for constituencies
Yes.
in 1997.
You see, the new legal regime is in the new constitution.
Sir, if you could just help me.
Yes.
I'm talking about 1997, when the Gwasi constituency was created. What was the applicable legal regime?
Well, I think the ECK had a mandate to delimit.
You and I are lawyers,
Yes.
so that you don't say you think. Perhaps, do you have a definite answer to that question? What was the legal regime applicable that time?
The then ECK were the ones who were responsible for boundary delimitation at that time.
Under what law?
And I think it must have been, and I'm not sure about that.
You're not sure about that. Now, currently, who has the mandate to delimit constituency boundaries?
It's IEBC.
It's IBC.
Yes.
Do you know where that power is provided for in law?
Yes, in the Constitution.
Yes, where in the Constitution?
Section, is it 89?
We agreed that we use article in the Constitution.
Sorry, Article 89.
It's Article 89.
Yeah.
Is there any law? You're sure about that?
Yes.
Is there any law that has been promulgated by Parliament to deal with boundaries delimitation?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay. Now, let me go to familiar territory, sir. As an MP, do you remember any monumental contribution you made to constitutionalism, public policy, or electoral management of electoral affairs as an MP?
In the floor of Parliament, yes.
That's what I'm asking, sir.
Yes.
Yes. Go on.
Yeah. You see, at the time when I was an MP, that was when the clamor for the new constitution was on. And we all the time had issues to the constitution being discussed in Parliament.
So I'm asking, instead of we, because we have one applicant,
Yes.
instead of we, I'm asking, what was your personal effective contribution? A member of Parliament has a lot of instruments to affect policy and legal matters. Do you remember anything you did as a member of Parliament towards electoral reform or advancement of constitutionalism?
Yes, I do remember. To begin with, I was a member of the initial parliamentary constitutional committee. And we all the time had meetings with with Professor Guy and his committee and all that, and also contributed on the floor of the House substantially on the issues of constitutional reforms.
Before we come to the floor of the House, did you move a motion, a member's motion yourself, on any matter on constitutionalism, electoral reform, or public policy?
No, I didn't.
You didn't in the 5 years you were there?
Yeah.
Now, I have looked at the Hansard You know, the Hansard records parliamentary proceedings.
Yes.
And it records proceedings by name. And I didn't see your name appearing in very many places in terms of contribution in Parliament. But on 20th of March 2001, Parliament was adjourning. This is what I found. Because I found your name appearing twice in the 5 years in the Hansard. You know, our secretariat is Parliament. We have access to the Hansard. You know that. In 2000, on 20th March 2001, Parliament was debating CKRC. You know what was CKRC?
Yes.
The Constitution Review Commission, the one that was put in place in 2001, the one that led to the initial referendum in 2005.
Yes.
Parliament was debating entrenchment of CKRC in the Constitution. And the leader of government business, who was then Professor George Saitoti, rose to ask for adjournment of the House to go on recess. And members opposed, said, no, we have important business to discuss. We oppose this adjournment. Now, the record shows that Honorable Nyauchi, that was Kanyauchi, that was you,
Yes.
rose up and said, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion of adjournment. And the members of Parliament replied, shame, shame. And what is more interesting to me is that you went on in your argument to say that members of Parliament were entitled to a break because you needed to go and campaign, because if you didn't get that break, you will never return. And more importantly, you said this regarding CKRC. On the question of entrenchment, you said the entrenchment was not an urgent matter, and I'm reading. The second point is that the so-called CKRC is a constitutional creation. In as much as it is a constitutional creation, there is no need to say that we must entrench it. This is because commissioners are going out about their business. What we want to anticipate, some busybodies will go to court and scuttle the process. What is all this anticipation? To become, are we trying to become prophets? We are just politicians. We are not prophets. If indeed that were to happen, the best way to deal with issues is to tackle them when they arise. Now, this was a commission that was reviewing the Constitution. There was a suggestion to entrench it in the Constitution. You didn't think it was necessary. Does that define you?
No, it doesn't.
So that was a moment of, that was a rare moment.
It must have been, because I, as I've said, I was a founder member of the Constitutional Review Committee in Parliament.
Yeah, that's okay. I only have, perhaps I just have one question for you regarding this, and this perhaps will help us to get into your mind and the way you like to do things and what you do as a commissioner. You say that, in effect, that they were planning too early, and the best way. The question was whether the government would interfere with the Constitution and CKRC would be scattered if it was not entrenched in the Constitution. You said, if indeed that were to happen, the best way to deal with issues is to tackle them when they arise. And you said this is because the human mind is very fertile. And if you were to speculate, we will go on speculating endlessly. Is it your design of work to react to situations instead of being proactive?
No.
So again, that was a rare moment of...
It must have been. I can't remember. That was quite some time ago. So, but
well,
answered is answered. But it must have been a rare moment.
Unfortunately, I couldn't find more material on which to judge your participation in constitutionalism. But thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kimuli. I'll now request Dr. F.S. Abdallah to ask you a few questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mheshimiwa, karibu tena.
Thank you.
Right. Being one of an active stakeholders some years ago who has experienced our electoral process, please tell us, this panel, if there has been a change in the electoral process when you are there, when you are active, and what's going on now?
Well, not much change, but of course, a bit of it. For instance, right now, the result regime is through technology. That time it was completely manual. And of course, we also had only 3 persons contesting at that time. But now there are 6. So that is the difference. So of course, the ECK has to handle a bigger portfolio. But if you look at IEBC of then and IEBC of now, I wouldn't say that there is substantial difference in terms of management or even in terms of how the public perceives it. There's very little difference, more or less the same.
What's your opinion? Not the public, your opinion. Are we saying the forest and the monkeys are all still the same from that time and now on a lighter note? There's no changes you've seen on improvements apart from the technology?
Not much, I must say, in my own view. Because I, as a private citizen now, I'm part of the private citizenry and a consumer of what IEBC does. So I can say that from where I sit, there isn't much of a difference, really.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. In that case, now, if you have the opportunity to get this post of being one of the commissioners in IEBC, what changes or improvements you would suggest for a fair and credible election management in this country?
Well, one of the most important things which I think IEBC should be doing is to be more transparent, particularly to the stakeholders. And here the stakeholders include the political parties, the whole of the Kenyan voters, because those are really the people they serve. So to be more transparent, number one, and then to be more accountable. Because accountability then means that people are satisfied with what you are doing. So if you are transparent and you are accountable and you get your messaging right, because at the moment and even then, the messaging from IEBC was always not to the point. But if you can get your messaging right, then many things can probably go right. But more importantly is, this is a public institution. Why would they not open up their doors, so to speak, to the stakeholders? Why wouldn't they have an open door policy? Because if they so do, then a lot of suspicion and that kind of thing will not be there. And I think that is what, if I'm selected to join IEBC, I would bring in. But more so, also encourage more of dialogue when there are certain contentious issues, particularly with the stakeholders. More dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. You'll be more transparency, more accountable, and more dialogue.
Yes.
Right, thank you. Now, could you please explain to this panel what are the external factors affecting the operation of the Commission which you are aware of, and how will you deal with them? Can I repeat myself? Oh, you've got me.
Say again?
Right.
Yeah.
Could you please explain to this panel what are the external factors affecting the operation of the Commission which you are aware of? And if you happen to be the next one of the next commissioners, how will you deal with them?
Now, there are several external factors which affect the operations of IEBC. First of all, our politics. Our politics is at times a zero-sum game, and once in a while, the politicians train their sights and at IEBC, and that affects the operations of IEBC. And coupled with that is that more often than not, politicians would try to influence decisions at IEBC. So if that happens, then obviously it also affects decision making at IEBC. Now, the second very important issue which affects IEBC externally is a lack of finances, because the money which they use comes from the exchequer, and more often than not, the money is not readily available, and or available at a very when it is almost too late for purposes of their operations. So, and without money, because IBC is really, like one would say, is the heart of this country. So if they are not well funded or not funded in time, then obviously the operations will be affected. Now, the third one is the issue of our laws and parliament. More often, we find that very critical laws which affect the operations of IBC are passed at a very late stage. So much so that the IBC has to bend backwards to accommodate those laws into their operations, particularly when elections are very close. So that is a very big external influence on IBC's operations. Then, of course, there are legal issues, court cases, particularly closer to the elections. Quite a number of people go to court, and on many issues, including those to do with the procurement. And when that happens, then obviously it affects the timelines and operations of IEBC. So those are the few which I can talk about immediately.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. As they say, you know, there's some of these things you don't learn in university. They learn on the ground. And with having you here, could you please tell us, when you're a politician, were you one of the people who are interfering with IBC? Have you had the opportunity to do that?
No.
You're not one of those politicians?
No.
So the word politician was generalizing it?
We all live in this country, and we all see the newspapers, and we know what has how guns can be trained at IEBC, and it's always done.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. What is the role of the National Assembly / Senate parliamentary committees in the IEBC Commission? we're talking about the funding. Obviously, there's a procedure where the IBC funding is coming and approved by somebody somewhere.
Yes.
So what is the role of the National Assembly and the Senate, where you have served diligently for 5 years?
Their role is, you see, at all times there are certain laws which IBC may need to amend, for instance, or IBC would want to have certain laws operationalized by having breaking it down further. So what happens is the IBC would send this to Parliament, the suggestions of laws which should be amended or laws which need to be operationalized. And the JLAC in Parliament would look at this and discuss together with people at IBC these recommendations, and if they are reasonable, they then move through Parliament, through the committee stages, then to the whole House for purposes of amendments and operationalization.
Thank you. Mheshimiwa, would I be correct saying that the committees of the National Assembly and Senate are the ones who approve the budget reallocation and exercise oversight of the expenditure?
That's correct.
So that means this funding issue could be also not IBC's own fault, because it needs to be passed by the Parliament and the Senate, isn't it?
Well, it is not IEBC's fault. That's why it is an external fault. And you see, once IEBC has put in how much money they need for their operations and for elections, this goes to Parliament, and eventually, once this is passed, it goes to the Exchequer. But now the problem is getting the money to IEBC, which is the problem, to get the money itself.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdallah. I will now request Mr. Gideon Solonka to ask you a few questions.
Yes, Mheshimiwa, in which committees were you serving while in Parliament?
Energy Committee.
Yes.
And Constitutional Review Committee.
Constitutional Review
Committee.
What was it called?
It was called Parliamentary Constitutional Review
Committee.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing that you refer in your CV as Parliamentary Select Committee on the implementation of the Constitution?
Yes.
Which Constitution were you implementing?
No, it was not a select committee. It was just a committee of Parliament, the usual committees.
I'm reading your CV.
Yes.
And you've indicated that as a member of Parliament, I served in the following committees. 1, Parliamentary Select Committee on the implementation of the Constitution.
I think it is select which shouldn't be there.
It is?
The word select
Should be?
shouldn't be there. The word select.
What about implementation of the Constitution?
That was the name of the committee.
And which Constitution were you implementing then?
We were not implementing, but that is at the initial stages of working on the new Constitution 2010.
Okay. Now, Mheshimiwa, the one election that Kenyans have placed high premium or high value, if you like, is the presidential election.
Yes.
And they are eagerly waiting to see the commissioners who will come on board, I believe mainly because of that presidential election. Now, what is the current procedure for transmission of presidential election results?
Now, the current procedure is found in Section 44 of the Elections Act. And that section says that IEBC can use any technology for purposes of transmission of results. That's what the original act said. But then this was amended. So, number one, that is technology. But this was amended just before the second presidential elections in October to put in manual that presidential elections could be transmitted manually, and that technology would be a backup. But this matter went to court, and the court ruled that the amendment is unconstitutional.
Honorable Nyauchi,
Yes.
I simply want you to tell us how is transmission done as regards presidential elections, and I'll be glad if you are able to cite like the provisions of the Constitution that governs that.
Transmission should be done electronically, but because there was an amendment to the Elections Act so that it is manual, backed by electronic. So at the moment, as we sit here, my view is that because that amendment was declared unconstitutional, there is no clear law.
So, Mheshimiwa, you're not familiar with Article 86A and B of the Constitution regarding how these presidential election results are transmitted? Are you familiar with Article 138(3)(c) of the Constitution?
So I'm just stating what is the case, because as far as I know, transmission of presidential results should have been by electronic, and that's how it was in the last elections. But then there was an amendment.
Which is the primary statutory form in respect of presidential election?
There is the National Assembly and Presidential Elections Act.
No, I'm saying the primary statutory form in respect of presidential election. That form, yes.
Yeah.
Which form is that?
No, I don't have that.
Have you heard of Form 34A?
Yes, yes.
Who fills that form?
The returning officer?
Are you sure?
Yes.
And who fills Form? Which is the other form after Form 34?
We have 34A and there is 34 itself.
So who fills that Form 34A?
The returning officer.
And what about Form 34B?
Also the returning officer.
Also the returning officer?
Yes.
What about 34C?
No, I'm not sure about that.
You're not sure? Okay, fair enough. Now, I think let's move to something else. What is the mandate of IEBC as regards elections campaign financing?
Now, their mandate is to regulate finances which are used by political parties and also candidates.
Where do we find, where do they derive that power in the Constitution? Which article gives them that power?
Well, I know of the Elections Finance Act.
What about the Constitution?
I'm not sure about that.
You're not sure. Okay. Is this election finance? It's called. What is it called? What is it called? Election
Campaign Finance Act.
Yes. Is it in operation?
No, it's not in operation because the guidelines which the IEBC wanted were sent to the Senate, but the Senate has not discussed and dispensed with it.
They were sent to the Senate?
Well, to Parliament.
To Parliament?
Yes.
And what about the Act itself? Are you familiar with the provisions of that Act?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is pending before the Parliament? Before Parliament?
What is pending is the rules.
The rules.
Yeah, the rules so that it is operationalized.
Okay.
So that, for instance, they normally give how much the capping on how much a party should use or an individual candidate should use. So that kind of thing. That's what is pending in Parliament.
And do you think if you are to get this job, will you be able to convince Parliament to do what they need to do so that the country moves forward with these regulations that have been pending for quite some time? What will you do?
Well, what I would do is really to knock on the door of Parliament for issues like this, which have been pending for a long time, if they can be dispensed with, so that, like you say, the country can move forward.
Thank you, Mr. And good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Solonka. I'll now ask Madam Elizabeth Mayo to ask a few questions.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Nyauchi.
Yes.
I want to refer to the response you gave Dr. Abdallah. And in that response, you rightfully identified the electorate as a key stakeholders to IEBC. And you outlined that the expectations that the electorate actually are looking forward that IEBC must do, one is transparency, accountability, effectively communicating to the electorate, and having a feedback mechanism.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. So in your view, what are key 5 expectations IEBC also expect from the electorate? Such that if you are appointed a commissioner, maybe next month, you will expect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the electorate.
Well, the first one is to be responsive to IEBC, particularly on issues like voter registration and voter education, and also to constantly inspect or check whether they are registered, that is, to register and to vote when the time comes for voting.
That is all, eh?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You have also said that at times, I hope I'm clear, some politicians would try to influence decisions at the IEBC. I'm just quoting what you said.
Yes.
I'm right? So, we have state capture and political interference. These are challenges which are being experienced in many developing countries on the matter of elections. If you are appointed as a commissioner, how would you deal with the issue of state capture and political interference to ensure and to uphold the independence of the commission?
Well, the first thing I would do is, like I said, to open doors of channels of talking to political parties, because I think that's very important, so that they understand us and so that we are moving from the same page. Because if they understand what we are doing at IEBC, then there would be no need for them to either try to capture the IEBC or to vilify the IEBC. That's why I was saying an open door to the politicians. So that is an important segment of what I would suggest we do at IEBC. Talk to them, be open, and when we have problems, be open about the problems. Like if we have problems with say what we are you going to use for results or delays in purchase of things, be transparent and talk to them. But then we are lucky in Kenya, we have the political parties liaison committee, which is a bridge between the IEBC, the political parties, and which that can also be used to ensure that this state capture and bad blood is reduced.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my next question is on voter education. So, if you are appointed as the commissioner and you are in charge of voter education, what are some of the challenges you think the youth are encountering out there that actually is stopping them from registering as voters? And how would you resolve such challenges?
Well, you see, the world is changing rapidly. It's not like 10 years, 20 years ago. So the youth, many of the youth now are probably not as proactive about politics as the youth of 20, 30 years ago. So that underlines one reason why they are not interested. The second reason why they would not be interested in politics or in registering as voters is those years finding jobs was not as difficult as it is now. So that the present youth is more preoccupied with how they can find jobs than it was 20, 30 years ago. So having said that, I would be innovative so that I think like the young. And the young, they think through many ways. They engage quite a bit in social media. So I would employ that technology. But not just that one, I would employ technology in general, social media, Instagram, and be innovative to capture the youth.
Yeah, I would like you to tell us, because the youth are watching, how would you use technology to help them in registration, the social media you are talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. First, you identify the challenge.
Yes.
After identifying the challenge, tell us how social media use will help them solve that problem.
So, the social media will be my platform to bring them in, but I must find a cause which can rally the youth behind registration of voters. For example, I can say that we want to see how the young people can get jobs immediately after elections through voting in the right people. So come in, help us vote the right people, and we'll help you get jobs after the elections. Something like that.
Can I assume that you are assuming that all the youth who are not registered are having identity cards? Remember, they cannot register as a voter if they don't have ID cards.
No, not all of them, because that is one of the biggest problems, the lack of identity card amongst the youth who have attained the age of 18. So, of course, that is another problem, because in many places, even getting an ID is a problem, particularly in border districts. But even if you are not border district, the process of getting an ID is a process, it takes time. But those also who have gotten don't necessarily register. So that's why there have been suggestions that probably the best thing is for the registration bureaus to be connected, so that as somebody takes their ID, they also automatically become registered as voters. So that would solve the problem.
Okay, thank you. My next question is on Parliament is an important stakeholder to IEBC.
Yes.
In what areas can the two engage throughout the electoral cycle to ensure free and fair election? I'm asking this because you are Honorable Nyawichi, you are a member of Parliament, so you can give us insight on that.
Now, first of all, Parliament is composed of members of Parliament, and those are almost primary consumers of IEBC's hardware, so to speak. So, if they can have constant dialogue on issues of mutual interest, that would be very important. Now, then, secondly, electoral matters are, quite a bit of them are based on legal issues, laws, which are passed in Parliament. So if, because of this constant dialogue, suitable laws which IEBC deems fit for purposes of its operations can be passed by the legislatures, this will go a long way to help in ensuring that IEBC operations are smooth.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll now request the Vice Chair to ask a few questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Honorable Nyauchi, you are a senior legislator as well as a legal practitioner. And I'm sure you, as you put it, you've been involved in governance, both at the local level, in your constituency level, national level, in Parliament, all these years. Now, what do you think ails our democratic governance in this country, to the extent that we are still at it, trying to reform this and reform that. What is that thing that makes us not get it right for nearly, you're doing almost 4 decades of reforms?
First is probably our attitude. Because we, as a nation, we are just 50 or so years old. And we are kind of a nation which was hobbled together by the colonial governments, by the colonial authorities. So it's taken some time for us to be a cohesive society. Probably we'll get there someday as more and more people get enlightened and get more educated. So, so therefore I'm saying probably that affects our nationhood to some extent. Then, of course, we have this issue of winner takes it all, which has always been a problem. It's a big political problem, and I think we have to grapple with it, because it makes our democratic institutions to really suffer, particularly like the IEBC at times of elections. So those are the ones which I can see, but as I said, as more and more people get educated and more people get intermarried to each other's tribes in Kenya, we will get over this one.
Yeah, just mentioning that education, as you say, as more get enlightened and educated, we will possibly get over that. Now, this is the problem we have today, is that those young professionals, dashing intellectuals, who like to get into leadership position despite all the potential they have for leadership, are not able to get into parliament. Very simple reason: they don't have the money. Why? Because our leadership today is bought. If you don't have the money bags to pay for the vote at a price, you can't get into parliament. And the bid price keeps getting higher and higher as those who have the money bags, despite how they got it, get into leadership positions, they go for elections, and they're able to buy them, the voter and get into power. What we end up with, of course, are not what you would call ethical leaders, but leaders who have bought themselves into power. How do we solve this problem? How can the country solve the problem of getting leaders they deserve, and not leaders who buy themselves into power?
Well, probably the electorate are also partly to blame, because if they allow themselves, like you say, to be influenced by money. But like I said, these are some of the problems which, as more and more people get to go to school, we hope we will get politics, money out of politics. And so that is number one. But then number two is we constantly have to talk to our people about good governance and about having the right people to lead them. It's a conversation which we must have all the time, and hopefully we'll get there someday.
You know, when you got elected into parliament, did you have to pay for the vote, or how did you overcome this problem?
Say that again. Did I?
When you got elected into parliament for the first time, did you have to pay for the vote? And how did you overcome that problem? I'm looking at your first time as a parliamentarian. How did you overcome this problem?
Oh, well, things change. Times have changed. When I went to parliament in 1997, it wasn't such a cutthroat. Actually, going to parliament wasn't a big deal those days. So it wasn't a cutthroat business the way it is now. Now, because it is now cutthroat, the candidates also make it expensive, using money and all that. But when I went to parliament, we would only use facilitation, something modest, not outrageous figures which I hear these days.
I'm really at this issue of governance and how we deal with it, which affects electoral democracy. How do we solve that problem so that getting to parliament as a people servant, you don't have to spend colossal sums of money. You just have to prove that you have the qualities that deserve you to get elected, and then you get in there. How do we solve this problem? Why is getting into parliament so lucrative? You use the cutthroat business. Why is it a lucrative business instead of getting to parliament to provide leadership, servant leadership?
Well, you see, our country is not a rich country. So the salary in parliament is very attractive. So that's one of the reasons why it is cutthroat. But then, as you go to the National Assembly, you also are exposed to very good connections. You can do other things. So it's not just the money, it is also the connections, and so that makes it very competitive. But as I've suggested earlier, we talk to our people, dialogue, constantly telling them that better good leadership than some money, and then poor leadership follows later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'll now request Reverend Father Mutie to ask you a few questions.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Felix Nyauchi, I would want to have a moment and ask you a few questions. But in trying to follow up from what my brother, Dr. Awori, asked the Vice Chair, asked you, trying to imagine, it is there in the public that, in the public perception that MPs, push for their interests whenever they are elected to become members of or to serve in Parliament. And this is because they want to get back the money they used during campaigns and the like. What is your take or view on this?
So what is the question? That...
Can I repeat myself?
Yes, yes.
The money that they spend during the campaigns and the like. I know you know, and you've rightly said it, that, you know, there are so many promises that they do during campaigns. They promise the youth employment, they promise so many things. But when they get to office, you know, because they have spent a lot of money in their campaigns, they would want to get that money as quickly as possible. In your own way of thinking, what is your take on that perception?
Well, it's not very far from the truth, because surely if you have spent X money to be elected, it's only reasonable that when you get elected, you recoup X. That's just the way things go. But like I said, it is something which we should change as a nation, so that we are not just looking at the past strengths of Mr. X so that we give him votes. We should change it so that we look at what Mr. X can do for us when he gets elected.
As a politician, sir, and I know even up to now you have political affiliate. You are politically affiliated to either political parties or, in your way of thinking, if you get a position at IEBC to become a commissioner, don't you feel that you will be partisan?
No, Father. You see, the law really does not prohibit a commissioner from being a member of any party. But good manners just dictates that once you become a commissioner, you relinquish all that. And now, secondly, all of us in this country, those who are politically aware, probably would have an interest in A or B party. All of us. But it's like it said, it comes a time when there is a calling, when now you must shed that off and just do the work which the Kenyans have given you to do, and be partisan, non-partisan, and transparent, and get on with the job.
Thank you, Honorable Nyauchi. In our endeavor to do justice to this process, we've requested information from different institutions on the shortlisted candidates. And one of the institutions that we wrote to was the Law Society of Kenya, and they acknowledged the receipt of that request on the 30th of June 2021. They confirmed that according to their records, there are some issues that they raised about you, sir. That in 1983, you issued a dishonored check to the judiciary for payment of your practicing certificate, and you were admonished and ordered to pay the cost of 1,500 shillings. Do you have anything to tell this panel?
Well, 1983 goes a long way, but that is the year I started my practice, so probably I was really on a shoestring. I don't know. That's why the check bounced. But at the same time, the Law Society also gave me a very clean bill of health. I believe you have a letter to that effect. They never raised this 1,000 shillings issue in the letter which they gave me.
But is it true that, what they are telling us is right, that, you are ordered to pay that 1,500 shillings?
Like I say,
Okay, I hear
with
you.
honor, it's a long time ago, 1983.
Okay.
So I really can't remember, but I would think that would most likely not be quite true,
Okay.
if my recollection is.
Okay, thank you, sir. You don't have to struggle with this. Allow me to take you to another one. In 1999, there was also some allegation that you were withholding some amount of 43,000 shillings. The advocate found you guilty and convicted for failure to account properly for the amount of Kenya shilling 43,000, and the advocate was ordered to pay. You were ordered to pay the principal sum of 43,000 and a fine of 20,000 and a cost of 5,000. Do you recall that also?
That is possible.
Can you tell this panel something about that?
Well, when you are in practice such as mine, where you are dealing with contracts and many clients and things like that, it's possible for an oversight to happen so that you probably don't pay the client at a given time. But normally, when issues like that go to the Law Society or to our tribunal, we just sort them out because it looks straightforward. Maybe it was just an oversight. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Then the following year, in 2000, you also withheld 23,000, and you were found guilty and convicted, and was ordered to pay the principal amount of that Kenya shilling 23,000 plus interest and a fine of 5,000, and cost of Kenya shillings 15,000. Again, in 2007, you were suspended from the role of advocates for a period of 12 months for non-compliance with the orders. Those are two issues.
No, that one is not correct.
So you were not convicted and found guilty and convicted and ordered to pay the principal amount of 23,000?
No, that one I've not checked, but I'm only talking about the suspension.
You were not suspended on 15th of February in 2007 from the role of advocates for a period of 12 months for non-compliance to the orders?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no. I've never been suspended.
Then, sir, on 4th of December 2007, you paid the principal amount of 23,000 plus fines and cost. To that effect, are you aware that you did that? Do you remember? Do you recall?
It's possible, because this is I didn't get these things beforehand for me to check. Because once the Law Society gave me a clean bill of health, I assumed there weren't any issues. So I would not say yes or no, but I can say it is possible.
In your own recollections, do you remember or recall in 2004 or the year 2004, you are found guilty and convicted of failure to keep your clients informed and fail to respond to the in correspondence. You are ordered to pay a fine of 50,000. Can you tell this panel about something about that?
Failure to respond to correspondence. Like I was saying, this is possible. You see, a career in law of 40 years, 41 years, a lot of things can happen. And like I said, if only I had a prior knowledge of this so that I could have checked. So I'm saying it's possible.
I think the same year, it also happened that you were found guilty and convicted of failure to keep your client informed. And you also ordered to pay 30,000 shillings, Kenya shillings. Maybe you cannot remember that?
No, I can't remember.
Okay. In 2015, a few years ago, you were also found guilty and convicted and were ordered to pay a principal amount of 360,000 and a fine of 25,000 and a cost of 20,000. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do recall.
Could you tell this panel anything about it?
Yes. That was a land transaction where two parties came to me that they had agreed on a transaction to buy land. And they had agreed that Mr. A had the land, but the lady would purchase it and pay the money to Mr. A so that Mr. A would pay some monies which were owing at the city commission, rates, whatnot, so that he would get title deeds and then transfer the land to the lady. So I said, yes, I'll act for both of you, it's all right. So the money was paid, and I gave the money to the owner of the land. But now the owner of the land was unable to pay the rates and whatnot and get the titles to transfer the land. And the time which was agreed passed. So the lady said, I want my money back. Now, the owner of the land had no money to give back. So she raised a complaint that I should not have released the money. So when she raised a complaint, we went to the tribunal, and my defense was that they had agreed that the money should be used for purposes of releasing the titles. And eventually, the tribunal said, no, as a lawyer, you shouldn't have released the money. So pay back the money to the lady. So that's what I did. And then they fined me.
The complainant is Michael Awadu. Is that Awadu? Is that the lady is another, maybe could be another complainant? We are talking of a gentleman here whose name is Michael, Mr. Michael Awadu. Now you are talking of a lady. Is that another one, another case, or is the same case?
No. Well, this one, the one I was talking about is of a lady and a gentleman.
So this is another case. Okay, sir. May I ask you, since 1983, when you started practicing law, was that the precedence that you set for your clients?
Precedent?
Was that has that been your practice?
No, that has not been my practice. Because, as I said, even the complaints, they are just, I'm not trying to minimize the complaint, because a complaint is a complaint. But I would say two things. If a complaint is raised and you are able to deal with it, it shows you are a man of honor and integrity. But if you are not able to deal with a complaint, that's a different ball game. And in most cases, you could see that it's been dealt with and finalized. That is why even our tribunal gave me a clean bill of health. Even the Law Society, the letters are on record. So that's not my trend. I take responsibility and I deal with the issues. But then, again, not to minimize, if in 41 years you have been in practice and there are complaints which are about 4 or 5, I'm not saying that is, I'm not justifying anything, but I'm just saying human beings make mistakes. But if the mistakes are so small or so few, then Father.
I hear you, but sometimes,
Thank you.
you know, these clients may not, you know, may have spent a night without food, or, you know, it may have costed their children not to go to school.
Yeah, which is most unfortunate.
It may appear small to you, but to them.
No, I don't want to minimize anything, but as you will notice, they were all sorted out. So I don't run away from my responsibilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Nyauchi, and all the best. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Nyauchi, for your candid answers. We actually just received details of these complaints just this morning before we started our interviews for the day. As you leave, we'll arrange for you to receive a copy just for your records, but I want to acknowledge that the matters are marked settled. We just wanted to confirm from you whether they were indeed made in the complaints were made and that you are aware of them. Honorable Nyauchi, we've come to the end of your interview. I'd like to give you this opportunity to make any remarks you might want to make to the panel.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful for giving me this opportunity to be with these great panelists. And I want to say that I very much liked the atmosphere, and I ask God to bless you all and bless our republic.
And on our part, on behalf of this panel, myself and even other Kenyans, want to extend our appreciation to you for having shown the interest to serve this country again, and now in the position of IEBC Commissioner. We thank you for that, and we do wish you well. So God bless you too, and have a good rest of the evening. A member of the Secretariat will walk you out. Please ensure you get your original certificates handed back to you. Otherwise, have a good evening.
Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you. We have now come to the end of the interviews for today. We will resume on Monday at 9:30 a.m. Thank you.
We value your feedback. If you would like to send questions, comments, or suggestions